What if your best friend exposed your gay secret and you lost everything? That single question slammed into me like a freight train the moment Ryan's text lit up my phone. I'm sorry, Seb. I couldn't keep it anymore. Your family knows. My hands shook so hard the screen blurred. Sebastian Hale, 28, junior partner at one of Chicago's top law firms. The guy everyone called steady, reliable, the one with the perfect resume and the even more perfect straight-acting smile. Gone. All of it. In the space of one forwarded screenshot, my entire life unraveled. I had trusted Ryan since freshman year at Northwestern. We roomed together, partied together, covered for each other when exams got brutal. He was the brother I never had. And I had begged him, literally on my knees in his apartment 6 months earlier, never to tell a soul about Gabriel. Gabriel Rivera, the soft-spoken painter I met at an underground gallery opening in Wicker Park. The man whose quiet laugh could quiet every storm inside me. We kept it hidden because my parents still sent me Bible verses every Sunday, because the senior partners at the firm still made locker room jokes that weren't jokes at all, because coming out felt like stepping off a cliff with no harness. Now the cliff was gone and I was falling. The first call came from my mother. Her voice cracked like thin ice. Sebastian, is it true? That man Gabriel? Tell me it's a lie. I couldn't speak. The silence was my confession. She hung up without another word. By evening my father had texted a single line. Don't come home for Christmas. We need time. The firm's managing partner scheduled an emergency meeting for Monday. I already knew what it meant. Ryan had sent the same photo to my boss, Gabriel and me kissing on the rooftop of my building, taken from across the alley without us noticing. One click, one forward, and the secret I had guarded for 4 years became public property. I sat on the floor of my apartment surrounded by the life I had built. The leather couch we had picked out together, the abstract painting Gabriel gave me for my birthday, the framed degree from Northwestern that now felt like a lie. My phone kept buzzing. Friends I thought were mine suddenly concerned. Coworkers asking if I was okay. A cousin I barely spoke to demanding details. Each notification carved another piece out of me. Gabriel arrived an hour later, letting himself in with the key I had given him on our 6-month anniversary. He didn't say anything at first. He just knelt beside me, wrapped his arms around my shoulders, and held on while I finally broke. I'm so sorry, I whispered against his chest. I should have been stronger. I should have told them myself. He shook his head. You didn't do this. Ryan did. His voice was steady, but I felt the tremor in his hands. He was scared too. His own family back in California still didn't know, and now the news would travel. But he stayed. That night he stayed. The next morning the firm called. Not a meeting, an immediate termination for conduct unbecoming. No severance, no explanation beyond the obvious. By afternoon my landlord texted that several tenants had complained about the situation. 30 days notice. I stared at the eviction warning and realized I was watching every pillar I had leaned on crumble at once. Gabriel drove me to a small Airbnb on the north side while I tried to process the speed of the collapse. We didn't talk much on the way. Words felt too heavy. Instead he kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting on my knee, a silent anchor. When we finally parked, he turned to me. We'll figure this out, Seb. You're not alone in this. I wanted to believe him, but the man I saw in the rearview mirror, eyes hollow, shoulders slumped, didn't look like someone who could figure anything out. That first week, I barely left the apartment. I replayed every conversation with Ryan, every time I had laughed at his jokes while hiding the most important part of myself. I had chosen silence to keep the peace, and the peace had turned on me. Gabriel worked from the tiny kitchen table, sketching new pieces, but I could see the worry lines deepening on his forehead. He canceled 2 gallery showings without telling me. I found out later from a mutual friend. He was protecting me even while his own career took hits. My mother called again on day 10. This time she cried. We raised you better. We don't understand. Help us understand. I tried. I told her about the years of pretending, the fear that if I spoke the truth I would lose them. She listened, but the silence that followed felt like another door closing. My father never called. My younger sister texted once, "I still love you, but Mom and Dad need space." Space. The word tasted like exile. Gabriel watched me spiral and finally sat me down on the worn couch. "You keep saying you lost everything. But look at me. I'm still here. That's not nothing." His brown eyes held steady, the same eyes that had first caught mine across that crowded gallery. I realized then that the love I had been terrified to name out loud was the only thing still standing. It wasn't enough to rebuild a career or a family yet, but it was enough to breathe. We started small. Gabriel convinced me to walk with him along the lakefront at sunrise, when the city was still quiet. The wind off Lake Michigan whipped our coats, but the cold felt honest. For the first time, I spoke the words out loud to someone outside our circle. "I'm gay." Not whispered, not hidden behind a joke. Just said. The sky didn't fall. The water didn't swallow me. Gabriel squeezed my hand and smiled like I had just won a marathon. But the world outside wasn't finished with me. Old colleagues posted vague LinkedIn updates about professional integrity. A cousin I hadn't seen since high school blocked me on every platform. Ryan tried to apologize with a long text that began, "I thought I was helping you live truthfully," and ended with, "I never meant for it to go this far." I deleted it without replying. Helping. The word burned. Gabriel's own family situation worsened when his mother heard through the grapevine. She flew in from Sacramento for a weekend, sat across from us in a coffee shop, and asked the questions every parent asks when their son's truth surfaces. "How long? Why didn't you trust us? Are you happy?" Gabriel answered with a calm I envied. I sat there feeling like an intruder in someone else's reckoning. His mother left with a hug for him and a cautious nod for me. Progress, he called it. I called it survival. By the end of the first month, I had applied to 20 firms and heard nothing. Savings dwindled. Gabriel sold 2 paintings to cover rent. We ate rice and beans some nights and laughed about it because laughing was the only way not to cry. One evening he came home with a small canvas wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said. I unwrapped it to find a portrait of the two of us on that rooftop, the same rooftop where Ryan had snapped the photo that started everything. But in Gabriel's painting the sky was full of light, not shadow. "This is who we are," he told me. Not what they took. That painting became my turning point. I hung it above the couch and every morning I looked at it before job hunting. I started writing cover letters that didn't hide anything. "I am a dedicated attorney who happens to be gay. No apologies." The rejections still came, but so did one unexpected email from a small civil rights firm downtown. They had seen the news. Chicago's legal community is smaller than it looks, and they wanted to talk. Not because of scandal, but because of the fight they saw in my story. The interview was terrifying. The partners, both openly gay men in their 50s, asked the hard questions. How do you handle betrayal? How do you rebuild trust? I told them the truth. I told them about Gabriel, about the lakefront walks, about the painting. They hired me on the spot. Junior counsel, half the pay, twice the purpose. It wasn't the prestige I had lost, but it was a door opening instead of slamming shut. Gabriel celebrated with takeout Thai and a bottle of cheap wine. We sat on the floor eating straight from the cartons, and for the first time since the text I felt something like hope. "You didn't lose everything," he said quietly. "You just lost the parts that were never yours to keep." The second month brought more fractures. My father sent a letter, actual paper, asking me not to contact my younger cousins. "They're impressionable," he wrote. I read it twice, folded it, and placed it in a drawer. Some cuts don't heal fast. But Gabriel's mother started texting me recipes. Small things. A bridge, however narrow. We moved into a one-bedroom in Logan Square with cheaper rent and better light for Gabriel's studio. I started volunteering at the local LGBTQ youth center on weekends, telling my story to teenagers who looked at me like I had survived a war. Some nights I still woke up gasping, dreaming of Ryan's text. Gabriel would pull me close and whisper, "You're safe now. We're safe." Spring arrived early that year. We took the train to Milwaukee for a weekend, walking the lakefront hand in hand without glancing over our shoulders. No one stared. No one whispered. For the first time I understood that the world I had feared was smaller than the one I could build. Gabriel sketched the shoreline while I watched him, realizing the man beside me had never asked me to be anyone else. Back in Chicago, I received a message from an old law school friend who had heard everything. She wanted coffee. I almost deleted it. Gabriel saw my hesitation and said, "You don't have to forgive Ryan, but you can let other people in." So I met her. She listened, cried, and apologized for the silence of our mutual circle. "We didn't know how to talk about it," she admitted. "We do now." That conversation planted another seed. By summer, I had argued my first case for the new firm, a custody battle involving a gay father fighting for visitation. I won. The look on the client's face when the judge ruled in his favor cracked something open inside me. For years, I had defended corporations. Now I defended people whose secrets had cost them everything too. The work felt like redemption. Gabriel's first solo gallery show opened in July. The centerpiece was a new series he called After the Fall. One painting showed two silhouettes on a rooftop at dawn, the city lights below them like scattered stars. I stood in front of it for a long time while strangers moved around me. A critic asked Gabriel what inspired the series. He looked straight at me across the room and said, "Love that refused to stay hidden." That night we walked home through the humid streets, fingers laced, talking about the future instead of the past. We talked about maybe telling my mother the full story one day. We talked about Gabriel's mother visiting again. We talked about a life where we didn't have to measure every word. The city lights stretched ahead of us, bright and endless. I still carry the scar of Ryan's betrayal. Some mornings I check my phone half expecting another bomb. But the man who checks it now is different. He has a partner who stayed when the world left. He has a job that matters. He has a voice he no longer mutes. The question that once haunted me, what if your best friend exposed your gay secret and you lost everything, has an answer I never expected. I didn't lose everything. I lost the version of me that was afraid to live. The new firm kept me busy, but the ghosts followed. Every time the elevator doors opened, I half expected Ryan to step out with that same apologetic smile he used when we were 20. Instead, I met clients whose stories mirrored mine in painful symmetry. A corporate executive who had been outed by his ex-wife. A teacher whose principal had suggested he resign after parents complained. Each case forced me to sit with my own rage and slowly, deliberately, turn it into strategy instead of silence. Gabriel's studio filled with light and the smell of turpentine. He worked late into the nights on a large canvas he wouldn't let me see. "Not yet," he would say, kissing my forehead before sending me to bed. I pretended not to mind, but curiosity gnawed at me. One humid August evening I came home early and found him staring at the finished piece. It was me, standing on the lakeshore at sunrise, coat whipping in the wind, face turned toward the horizon. The title scrawled in pencil on the back, "The Man Who Stayed." I couldn't speak. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and whispered, "You kept walking forward even when everything tried to pull you back. That's the story I want to tell." We hung it in our living room where the morning light would hit it first. Neighbors who stopped by for housewarming drinks noticed it immediately. One of them, an older lesbian couple who had lived in Logan Square for 30 years, asked if they could bring their book club to see the rest of Gabriel's work. Suddenly, our tiny apartment became a gathering place. People I had never met brought wine and questions and stories of their own. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt community instead of isolation. But the past refused to stay quiet. My sister called on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was hesitant. "Mom found the painting online. Someone posted a picture from the gallery show. She's not handling it well." I braced myself for another lecture. Instead, my sister said, "She keeps asking if you're okay. I think she misses you." The words lodged in my throat. Misses me. After months of radio silence, the possibility felt dangerous. Gabriel listened while I paced the kitchen. "You don't have to rush anything," he said. But if you want to open that door, I'll stand beside you. I waited 3 days before I dialed. My mother answered on the second ring. We didn't talk about the painting or the secret or Ryan. We talked about the weather in Chicago and the tomatoes she was growing in her backyard in Ohio. Small, safe things. When the call ended, she said, "Maybe I'll come visit. Just for a weekend." I hung up shaking. Gabriel made tea and didn't ask questions. He simply sat with me while the possibility of reconciliation settled like dust after an earthquake. Work brought its own complications. The firm represented a group of LGBTQ teachers fighting for inclusive curriculum. I spent weeks buried in depositions and briefs. One afternoon, I looked up to find the senior partner watching me from the doorway. "You're good at this," he said. "Not just the law. The way you listen. The way you translate pain into arguments." He paused. "We've all been where you are. Some of us lost more than jobs." For the first time, I saw the older man not as a boss but as someone who had walked the same road. That night, I told Gabriel about the conversation. He smiled the quiet smile that always made my chest loosen. "See? You're building something new on the ruins." Autumn brought cooler winds and a letter from Ryan. Not a text this time, actual handwriting on thick stationery. He had moved to Denver for a new job. The letter was long and messy, full of excuses and genuine regret. He had thought outing me would free me. He had been jealous of the life I seemed to have while hiding. He had been wrong. I read it twice, then carried it to the lakefront and tore it into tiny pieces. The wind took the fragments across the water. Gabriel stood beside me without speaking. When the last scrap disappeared, he said, "You don't owe him forgiveness. But you owed yourself that moment." The holidays approached like a minefield. Gabriel's mother invited us to California for Thanksgiving. I bought plane tickets before I could talk myself out of it. On the flight, I gripped his hand so tightly my knuckles whitened. His mother met us at the airport with a hug for both of us. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine. Over dinner, she asked careful questions about my family. I answered honestly. She nodded and passed me more stuffing. Small mercies. On the last night in California, Gabriel and I walked along the beach under a sky full of stars. The waves crashed in steady rhythm. He stopped, turned to me and said, "I want to build a life with you. Not in secret. Not in fear. Here or Chicago or wherever we land. But together out loud." The question hung between us like the moon. I answered by kissing him right there on the sand, salt air and all. No cameras. No hiding. Just us. We flew back to Chicago the next day carrying new luggage and new certainty. My mother's visit was scheduled for the following weekend. I spent the days cleaning, rearranging, trying not to panic. Gabriel baked her favorite lemon bars. When she arrived, she looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were clear. She hugged me first, then Gabriel. The three of us sat in the living room under the painting of me at sunrise. She studied it for a long time. "You look strong here," she said quietly. "I want to know that man." We talked until the streetlights came on. She didn't understand everything. She might never. But she listened. She asked about Gabriel's work. She asked about my new job. When she left, she pressed a small envelope into my hand. Inside was a check, not large, but enough for a deposit on a bigger place. "For both of you," she wrote on the card. "Love doesn't always look the way I expected. But it's still love." That night, Gabriel and I stood on our tiny balcony watching the city lights. Snow had begun to fall, soft and silent. He rested his head on my shoulder. "We didn't lose everything," he murmured. "We just traded the old map for one that actually leads somewhere." Winter settled over Chicago like a heavy blanket. The new apartment we found in Andersonville had tall windows and a second bedroom Gabriel turned into a proper studio. I commuted downtown each morning feeling less like a refugee and more like a man with purpose. The firm's cases grew more complex: adoption rights, workplace discrimination, a landmark challenge to conversion therapy licensing in Illinois. Every victory felt personal. Every loss reminded me how fragile the ground still was. My mother called more often. Some conversations were awkward, full of careful wording. Others surprised me with warmth. She sent care packages, homemade cookies, a scarf she knitted in the colors of the pride flag she had seen online. "I'm trying," she texted one night. I replied with a photo of Gabriel wearing the scarf while painting. She sent back 3 heart emojis. Progress measured in pixels. Gabriel's gallery show in New York was scheduled for February. We took the train east, sharing a sleeper car that rocked gently through the night. In the dark, he traced patterns on my arm and whispered plans for the future. A house with a yard someday. Maybe a dog. Kids, if we were brave enough. The words no longer felt impossible. They felt inevitable. New York in winter glittered like a promise. The gallery opening drew a crowd that spilled onto the sidewalk. Critics, collectors, other artists. Gabriel stood beside me in a charcoal suit, nervous energy radiating off him. When the gallery owner introduced the series after the fall, the room quieted. People studied the paintings. Me on the lakeshore, the 2 of us on the rooftop at dawn, the small canvas of our hands clasped on the train. One collector pulled Gabriel aside and bought the entire collection. The check was enough to pay off the last of my student loans and still leave breathing room. We celebrated at a quiet Italian restaurant in the village. Over pasta and red wine, Gabriel raised his glass. "To the man who taught me that love gets stronger when it's tested." I clinked my glass against his and realized the fear that had lived in my chest for years had finally loosened its grip. Not gone, but manageable, survivable. Back in Chicago, the thaw began. My sister flew in for a long weekend. She and Gabriel bonded over bad reality TV and late-night talks about art. She hugged me goodbye at the airport and said, "I'm proud of you, Seb. Really proud." The words landed like sunlight after a long winter. Ryan's shadow appeared once more in March. A mutual friend mentioned he had started therapy and was trying to make amends in his own life. I didn't reach out. Some doors stay closed for good reason. Instead, I focused on the doors opening around me. The youth center asked me to speak at their spring fundraiser. I stood in front of 200 teenagers and told my story without flinching. The applause that followed wasn't for me alone. It was for every kid in that room who still carried secrets. Gabriel sat in the front row, eyes shining. Afterward, a 17-year-old boy approached me. "You gave me hope," he said. That single sentence outweighed every loss. Spring brought new cases and new challenges. One involved a father fighting for custody after his ex-wife used his sexuality against him in court. I spent weeks preparing, working late while Gabriel kept dinner warm. The night before the hearing, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Gabriel rolled over and rested his hand on my chest. "You've already won the hardest case," he whispered. "The one against yourself." The hearing went well. The judge ruled in our client's favor. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt the weight of every past rejection lift a little higher. Gabriel and I planted a small garden on our balcony, tomatoes, basil, a single rosebush. Watching green shoots push through soil felt symbolic. Life insisting on itself. My mother visited again in May. This time she stayed a full week. She helped Gabriel in the studio, learning to mix colors. She attended one of my court dates and sat quietly in the gallery. On her last night, she hugged us both and said, "I see how happy you are. That's enough for now." Enough. The word felt like grace. Summer arrived with heat waves and street festivals. We marched in the Pride Parade for the first time, carrying a banner for the firm. Thousands of people lined the route. I held Gabriel's hand openly, no longer scanning the crowd for familiar faces that might judge. The roar of cheers washed over us like a wave. At the end of the route, we collapsed on the grass in Grant Park, sweaty and laughing. Gabriel pulled me close and kissed me right there under the bright sky. "This is us," he said, out loud. Finally, the firm offered me a partnership track. Not the corner office I once dreamed of, but a role shaping policy and mentoring new associates. I accepted. Gabriel celebrated by booking us a weekend in Door County. We rented a cabin on the water, spent days hiking and nights talking about everything we had survived. One evening on the dock, he handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a simple silver band. "Not a proposal yet," he said with that soft smile. "Just a promise that whatever comes next, we face it together." I slipped the ring on and felt the last jagged piece of my old life settle into place. The betrayal that had once shattered me had instead cleared the ground for something stronger. A love tested by fire. Career built on truth. A family redefined on our own terms. The ring on my finger became a quiet talisman. Colleagues noticed but said nothing beyond the occasional warm smile. Clients sometimes glanced at it during meetings and their shoulders relaxed, as if recognizing a shared language. I no longer hid it. I no longer apologized for it. Gabriel's work took off after the New York show. A major museum in San Francisco invited him for a 3-month residency. The offer included studio space, a stipend, and an apartment overlooking the bay. We sat at our kitchen table staring at the email for a long time. Chicago had been home through the worst months. Leaving felt like abandoning a battlefield before the war was fully won. But staying meant watching Gabriel turn down an opportunity that could define his career. We compromised. I would fly out every other weekend. He would come back for major holidays. The first separation lasted 10 days. I hated the empty studio, the quiet mornings without the smell of coffee and paint. But each video call reminded me why we were doing this. Gabriel's face glowed when he described the light in the museum studio. The new series taking shape. "I'm painting us again," he said one night. "But this time the horizon is wider." My mother surprised me by offering to stay in our Chicago apartment while Gabriel was away. She wanted to water the plants and keep the dust off. I knew it was her way of staying connected. She arrived with suitcases and a new attitude. Less scripture, more questions about my day. We cooked together on weekends. She even attended a firm event and introduced herself as Sebastian's mother without hesitation. Small revolutions. The youth center asked me to lead a support group for young men coming out to conservative families. 12 teenagers showed up the first night, eyes wide with the same fear I once carried. I told them my story, not the polished version but the raw one. The text from Ryan, the eviction notice, the nights I cried in Gabriel's arms. One boy stayed after and asked, "Did it get better?" I showed him the ring on my finger. "It got different," I said. And different turned out to be better. Gabriel returned for Labor Day weekend. We drove up to Wisconsin again, this time with my mother in the back seat. She and Gabriel talked art the entire way. At the cabin, she sat on the dock watching the sunset and said, "I used to think love had rules. I'm learning it has horizons instead." The words lodged somewhere deep. When we dropped her at the airport, she hugged Gabriel longer than me. "Take care of my son," she told him. He promised he would. Fall brought new cases and new growth. The firm won a statewide ruling protecting transgender students in sports. I argued the appeal. The night the decision came down, Gabriel called from California. We celebrated over video with cheap champagne and takeout. "You're changing laws," he said. "I'm just changing canvases." I reminded him his canvases had changed me first. The residency ended in November. Gabriel returned with crates of new work and a proposal that took my breath away. He had painted a triptych for me, one panel of the betrayal night, one of the lakeshore sunrise, one of us standing in the Pride Parade. The center panel showed 2 figures walking forward, hands linked, the city lights stretching into infinity. He hung it in our living room and said, "This is our story, all of it, and it's not over." Thanksgiving that year was the first we hosted. My mother, my sister, Gabriel's mother via video from California, and a few friends from the firm filled our apartment with laughter and too much food. No one mentioned Ryan. No one needed to. The empty chair at the table was no longer a wound. It was simply space we had outgrown. Christmas brought snow and quiet joy. We spent the holiday in California with Gabriel's family. His mother had redecorated the guest room with colors she said reminded her of my eyes. On Christmas Eve, we walked the beach again. This time I was the one who stopped, turned to Gabriel, and pulled out a small box of my own. Inside was a matching silver band. "Now it's official," I said. "Wherever we go next, we go as partners." Out loud. "Always." He said yes before I finished the sentence. We kissed under the same stars that had witnessed our first promise months earlier. When we told our families the next morning, my mother cried happy tears. Gabriel's mother hugged us both and whispered, "I'm so glad you found each other." The new year opened with fresh possibilities. The firm offered me a senior associate position with the freedom to take on more pro bono work. Gabriel received a commission from the Chicago Cultural Center for a public mural celebrating resilience in the LGBTQ community. We spent evenings sketching ideas together, my legal notes mixed with his paint swatches on the kitchen table. Life was not perfect. My father still kept his distance. Old colleagues sometimes crossed the street when they saw me downtown. But the circle around us grew larger and stronger. The youth group expanded. Gabriel's mural drew crowds. My mother started volunteering at the center once a month. Each small victory stitched the wounds closed. One evening in late February, we stood on the rooftop of our building, the same rooftop where the photo had been taken that started everything. Snow dusted the city lights below. Gabriel leaned against the railing and said, "Remember when you thought this view was the end?" I nodded. He smiled. "Turns out it was just the beginning." I looked at the man beside me, the ring on his finger catching the light, and realized the question that once haunted me had been answered in ways I could never have scripted. The betrayal that cost me everything had also given me everything that mattered. Spring exploded across Chicago with color and noise. Gabriel's mural took shape on the side of a community center in Uptown. Two intertwined figures walking toward a sunrise, their shadows forming the word resilience in subtle negative space. I spent lunch hours watching him work from a scaffold, paint streaking his arms, and wondered how I had ever thought I could live without this kind of partnership. The youth group grew to 25 regulars. One night, a boy named Marcus brought his mother. She sat quietly through the session, then stayed after to speak with me. "I didn't know how much he was hurting," she said. "Thank you for giving him a place to land." I thought of my own mother's slow journey and told her the truth. Change takes time, but it starts with one honest conversation. She left with a list of resources and a promise to return. My father's silence finally broke in April. A short email arrived. "I saw the mural online. It's powerful. Maybe we could talk sometime." I read it 3 times before replying with a single line. "I'd like that." We met for coffee in a neutral cafe. He looked older, shoulders slightly stooped. We didn't solve everything. He didn't suddenly wave a rainbow flag. But he listened when I described the last 2 years. When I showed him a photo of Gabriel and me at the Pride Parade, he studied it for a long moment. "You look happy," he said quietly. That's new. It wasn't approval. But it wasn't rejection either. We left the cafe with a tentative plan for dinner next month. Another door creaking open. Gabriel and I took a week off in May and drove to the Wisconsin cabin again. This time we brought the dogs we had adopted in March, 2 rescue mutts named Atlas and Horizon. They bounded through the woods while we sat on the dock talking about the future. Gabriel wanted to expand his studio. I wanted to take on more policy work at the state level. We made lists and laughed at how ordinary our dreams had become. Ordinary felt miraculous. Summer brought heat and celebration. The firm hosted its first annual Pride Gala. I stood on stage introducing the keynote speaker, an older activist who had fought the same battles decades earlier. When he finished, I looked out at the crowd and saw Gabriel in the front row, my mother beside him, both beaming. Later that night, Gabriel pulled me onto the dance floor under strings of fairy lights. "Remember when you were terrified of being seen?" he asked. I spun him once and answered, "I remember. Now I'm terrified of ever going back." My mother's transformation continued in small, steady ways. She joined a local PFLAG chapter. She started reading books Gabriel recommended. One afternoon, she called just to say she had marched in her town's small pride event. I carried a sign that said, "Proud of my son," she told me. I had to sit down. The woman who once quoted scripture to shame me now marched for me. Gabriel received an offer to teach a masterclass at the School of the Art Institute. The commitment meant more travel but also more stability. We celebrated with a rooftop dinner under the same sky that had once witnessed our lowest moment. Atlas and horizon curled at our feet while we toasted to the unexpected gifts hidden inside every loss. Fall returned with golden light and new routines. Marcus from the youth group started an after-school art program with Gabriel. My father attended one of Gabriel's gallery openings and bought a small sketch. He didn't say much, but the fact that he came spoke volumes. My sister got engaged and asked us both to be in the wedding party. "No hiding," she said. "You two are part of this family now." The year closed with a quiet ceremony at City Hall. Gabriel and I stood before a judge with my mother, my sister, and Gabriel's mother via video. 2 friends from the firm served as witnesses. No fanfare, no white dresses. Just 2 men exchanging rings they had already worn for months and promising the life we had already built. When the judge pronounced us married, I felt the last hidden fracture inside me heal. Gabriel kissed me softly while the small group clapped. My mother cried again, but this time the tears were only joy. That night we walked home through the city, hands linked, dogs trotting beside us. The streets we once feared now felt like home. The secret that had nearly destroyed me had instead forged the strongest version of myself. The man who had lost everything had gained something far more valuable: authenticity, community, and a love that refused to stay in the shadows. Winter arrived gently that year. We spent Christmas in California with Gabriel's family, then New Year's back in Chicago surrounded by the people who had walked every step with us. The apartment smelled of pine and fresh paint. Gabriel had finished a new series titled Horizons We Chose. Each canvas showed 2 figures moving forward against different backdrops. City rooftops, lake shores, courtroom steps, parade routes. The final piece was simply our hands, rings catching light, nothing else. He titled it Enough. I stood in the studio on New Year's Eve watching him clean brushes. "We made it," I said quietly. He turned, paint still on his cheek, and smiled the same smile that had anchored me through the darkest months. "We did more than make it," he answered. "We built something better." The new year brought new milestones. The firm promoted me to counsel with a focus on statewide policy. Gabriel's teaching position turned into a full-time faculty role. Marcus's art program received city funding. My father started joining us for monthly dinners. The conversations were still careful, but the silences between us grew comfortable instead of strained. My mother marched in Chicago's Pride Parade that summer, carrying the same sign she had made for her small town. She walked beside me and Gabriel the entire route. 5 years after that fateful text from Ryan, I stood on the same rooftop where everything began. This time the space was filled with string lights and folding chairs. Friends, family, colleagues, and youth group kids gathered for a small celebration of our 5th wedding anniversary. Gabriel had painted a new mural on the low wall, our story in miniature. The crowd laughed and toasted while Atlas and Horizon chased each other through the crowd. Later, when the guests had gone and the city quieted, Gabriel and I sat on the edge of the roof looking out at the lights. He rested his head on my shoulder. "Remember the question you used to ask yourself?" he said. I nodded. "What if your best friend exposed your gay secret and you lost everything?" He smiled. "Turns out the answer was, then you find everything that truly matters." I looked at the man beside me, the life we had built, the family that had grown around us, and felt the truth settle deep in my bones. The betrayal that once shattered my world had cleared the ground for something stronger, truer, and infinitely more beautiful. I had lost the version of myself that lived in fear. In its place stood a man who walked openly, loved openly, and helped others do the same. The city stretched below us, endless and bright. Somewhere out there another young man was probably staring at his phone, reading a message that threatened to destroy everything he knew. I hoped he would find the courage I once struggled to claim. I hoped he would find a Gabriel of his own. And I hoped, when the dust settled, he would discover the same truth we had learned the hard way. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to gain what you were always meant to have. In this story of betrayal and rebirth, Sebastian's journey shows that the deepest wounds can become the strongest foundations. The lesson is simple yet profound. Hiding your truth may protect you for a while, but living it sets you free. True love doesn't require silence, and real family grows when you give it permission to evolve. If you're carrying a secret that feels too heavy, remember, you don't have to carry it alone. The people worth keeping will walk beside you when the world shifts. And the life waiting on the other side is brighter than any fear ever promised.